Did Sabo just die? Because we just had one of the most chaotic and epic chapters in One Piece that was perfectly balanced with all the amazing Straw Hat interactions that I've been dying for. So that's where we're gonna start with this chapter review, because the Straw Hat greatness starts before we even get into the chapter. On the Shonen Jump magazine cover, we have Gear 5th Luffy, and on top of that, we have a double-page color spread of a recreation of a old Straw Hat double spread panel. This time though, it's updated with all the current Straw Hats, Jinbei included, and you love to see it. With that said though, we jump right into the chapter with the Straw Hats getting their initial reaction to everything that happened at the Reverie. As expected, Luffy and the Straw Hats are absolutely shocked. Luffy does not believe Sabo killed Cobra, and right off the bat we get this perfect dynamic between Luffy and Zoro, showing how they balance each other out. Because although Luffy is the captain, he could get very irrational, which is why he suggests to go to Alabasta right away. And then Zoro comes in as the vice captain, telling him that doesn't even make sense because it took place in Marijois, to which Luffy says, then let's go to Marijois, which is not only hilarious but also kind of iconic, because we are officially in the final saga and this chapter really feels like the start of the next arc. By the end of the final saga, I fully expect the Straw Hats to actually go to Marijois, so the fact that Luffy is saying it now at the beginning of the saga is a pretty neat touch. But of course, as of right now, it does not make sense for them to go to Marijois, and Zoro makes Luffy understand that. We also get reactions from all the other Straw Hats, but while all of this is happening, we see this little barrel in the corner of the panel that's kind of making movements. And I didn't even notice that in the first read through, but I'm sure all the Carrot stands were incredibly hyped that maybe Carrot has finally joined the Straw Hats. Well, it turns out to be Caribou. That's right, Caribou for Straw Hat fans that have been on my channel and commenting for the past 2 years, you guys have officially won. Well, not really, because Caribou's not actually joining, and in reality, he's really just a barrel full of information. Because he is currently with the Straw Hats, he definitely will be utilized in the next arc, but I don't really think it's gonna impact his character too much, and he won't really do too much just like he did in Wano. Instead, what really matters is that he's this container of information that knows about Pluton and Poseidon. Besides that though, another thing I was initially confused by is why Caribou would go with them in the first place, but then someone during my live reaction pointed out that the barrel is completely chained. And that's important to note because most likely he did not do that by himself. He got captured, which actually makes a lot of sense because when he found out about Pluton, he was right outside the door when several Straw Hats have great observation hockey. So it didn't make sense why they didn't notice him, but it turns out they probably did, and now they captured him because he knows that information. So yeah, for the time being, Caribou is with the Straw Hats and Carrot is not, unfortunately, and it looks like the Straw Hats just left her behind. Getting back to the Straw Hats though, we also see their reactions to the news. We see the Straw Hats that were actually around in Alabasta being really upset about Vivi and Cobra. But what I do find kind of funny though is that they're mostly worried about Vivi when she's not even dead. Cobra's the person that's actually dead, and the only person actually crying for him is Chopper, which like he cries about everything. So that just goes to show like even the Straw Hats knew that Cobra had one foot out the door. But yeah, the OG Straw Hats are all worried about Vivi. Some of them are crying. Meanwhile, you have some of the adults kind of adding in rational thoughts. But once again, the person that really comes in and settles everyone down and reins in Luffy is Zoro. He's the person to remind Luffy what he said about Ace and how he goes on his own adventures and telling everyone to believe in Vivi and her capabilities. And that just made the interaction so perfect. We had the nostalgia of everyone reacting to their time with Vivi, the great perspective from the adults, and then the Zoro vice captain on top of that. That was just perfection already. And then we get the cherry on top with the Alabasta Straw Hats making fun of Zoro and coming up with some of the funniest names to call him. Luffy straight up calls him Onigashima, Chopper makes like a pun with Big Mom's name, Sanji in classic fashion calls him Marimo, and then he's the only one that Zoro claps back on and calls him the fourth. Just a hilarious moment and a great overall Straw Hats interaction moment, and it's also a great callback to Alabasta where a similar situation played out. But yeah, for the time being, the Straw Hats are not going to take any drastic actions. I do think Vivi will still return by Elbaf. Given what we saw later in the chapter, she's definitely not with Sabo, and I think the more likely option, the option I liked more, is that she's actually with Don Sai. And Don Sai, who has Luffy's Viver card, he will be the person to guide her back to the Straw Hats. But to wrap up the Straw Hat reactions, Robin talks about some other news like the Cross Guild and how Buggy became an emperor. And one thing I really love is Luffy's reaction to this and how genuinely upset he is. Like, this is the second time where he's like, there must be some kind of mistake, like what is happening? And honestly, he has every right right to be upset. This man just damn near died like 7 different times defeating Kaido, and then Buggy all of a sudden passes him in bounty. Besides that though, the Straw Hats actually don't react to any other news because Robin doesn't share it, and this I think is pretty much a strategic move by Oda because Luffy probably would have wanted to know about Kobe and Boa, but Robin decides not to share that information because she doesn't really know how close she is to them, so it's a good reasonable way to kind of push that plot line for later down the line so the Straw Hats can address it when they actually fight Blackbeard. Because for the time being, we gotta talk about Luffy because he starts talking about his dream. He initially starts off the conversation by talking about Sabo and the type of person he is and how he just wants freedom for other people, and I really love these moments for Luffy because as gullible and silly and goofy as he is, one of the best things about him is how well he understands other people. So it's a really great moment to show how much he understood Sabo's past, which was also a really important moment for himself to realize like not all people are free and equal. And that leads to him reminiscing about his dream, and he reveals it to the Straw Hats. And once again, we get another tease about this dream because we don't find out what it is. All we see are the Straw Hat reactions. Now, as I've seen in the community, there's been some mixed reactions. Some people are tired of all the teases and just want some information, which I can understand to a degree, but I do really like this build up to what this dream actually is. The only thing I hope is that Oda's not gassing it up too much for it to be a little disappointing later. But as far as this tease goes, we actually get some clues by looking at all the different reactions from the Straw Hats. We see some similar reactions. Some of the Straw Hats are confused, some of them burst out laughing. Chopper looks very excited, and perhaps the most interesting reaction is Usopp, because Usopp is the only one that's like genuinely shocked and low-key feels a bit scared about this dream, and he's really the only person to tell Luffy multiple times that that dream is impossible, which makes his reaction really interesting because he knows Luffy very well. He's probably his best friend, so he knows how crazy Luffy is, and he's also someone that strongly believes in Luffy as he showed in Alabasta. So yeah, Usopp's reaction stands out the most to me, but the other Straw Hat reactions are also clues, because as I said with Usopp, they know Luffy very well and what he is capable of, so for them to like really think that he has an outlandish dream, it must be a really crazy out there dream, which I think likely means the popular theory that Luffy's dream is a big party is probably not it, because that's something they kind of already do. It's not really that impossible of a dream. And on top of that, we have another clue that's even bigger, which comes from Frankie, where he says you need to become the Pirate King to achieve this dream. And this is the biggest clue because now we know being a Pirate King is actually a prerequisite to complete this dream, which once again makes party unlikely because that doesn't really have anything to do with it. At the same time though, personally, I don't have a strong theory that I believe in either, and honestly that kind of makes it more exciting for me. I like to be surprised. But yeah, I've seen other ideas on this, like going to the moon or creating a kingdom of pirates or making the Marines and pirates become friends. None of them really stand out to me as one that makes a ton of sense. Instead, what we do know about Luffy's dream is that he needs to become the Pirate King. He has the same exact dream as Roger, which, quick side note, it was dope to find out Shanks was crying when he found out about Luffy's dream. But yeah, lastly, in regards to Luffy's dream, we know that it has to be this crazy outlandish dream that's kind of childish because he came up with it when he was just a little kid. As of right now, I don't have an answer for what that dream is, but if you have a good guess, definitely let me know in the comments. With that said though, the Straw Hats set sail to the next destination. They do have the 4th road poneglyph on their mind, but as Robin points out, they really have no information on it. As the readers, the last time we saw it was with Roger and Fishman Island, so the only 2 possible options that we know is either with the Roger pirates and someone like Rayleigh or Shanks, or it got collected by Whitebeard when he took over that territory and eventually got stolen by Blackbeard. I think the most likely options are either Shanks or Blackbeard because they're going to be very involved in this final saga, but for the time being, the Straw Hats have no information, so they're back on the log post, and I think they're gonna be like that until they get to Lodestar, the last island. Next up though, we're gonna talk about the big moment of this chapter with Sabo, but first, make sure you subscribe and join our King Pirates crew so you don't miss any future discussions like this one. But anyways, after moving on from the Straw Hats, we jump back to Sabo's conversation with the revolutionaries, and it turns out the Navy have actually intercepted the call and are passing the information along to the Gorosei. And as we already know as One Piece fans, anytime these 5 old men show up, it's gonna be hype, even if they are a little incompetent recently. And if that wasn't enough, we also see Emu, and we already know when Emu shows up,
it's about to go down.
But yeah, the Navy is currently tracking Sabo's call, and from that they find out he's in Lulusia Kingdom, which is one of the 8 kingdoms that recently rebelled, which does make sense given he has a lot of supporters there, but it does bring us to the first question of why go there instead of the Revolutionary Army. And honestly, I think there's a pretty clear answer here, which is that this was the only way he could get out of Marijois. We'll get into more of this later, but from the information that we know, it's very clear that Sabo separated from everyone else and ran into his own issues, and because of this he most likely had to escape by himself, so this was probably the only path he had, because the king of Lulusia was actually at the reverie, so it was a perfect way for him to get to somewhere that supported him. However, though, it turns out it might have not been the best choice, because after the Gorosei find out where he is, they start to say that he's unlucky and that this is his fate. And this bit of information is really important because it means that Lulusia was already doomed. Obviously, Sabo does get taken out as well, and he might have contributed to the timing of the attack, but going off what the Gorosei talked about, I think this attack was clearly predetermined, and I think it's very clearly related to the great cleansing that they had previously talked about, because that's exactly what is happening. They had previously asked Imu about which light they wanted to erase, and Imu crosses out Lulusia, just completely wiping them out and also erasing them from history by spreading fake news. And I think it's possible it might not only be Lulusia, the other 7 kingdoms that also rebelled might be in trouble. And don't worry, we're gonna discuss what that weapon is next, but first I have to talk about what happened to Sabo and whether or not he's dead. As expected, he did not actually kill King Cobra, and on top of that, it looks like he found out about Imu. But in classic fashion, before he's able to reveal it all, a big old beam comes through and Sabo gets decked. Now, is Sabo actually dead? I personally don't think so, and you guys know I'm someone that really doesn't like fake deaths in One Piece, but this one I feel like is pretty obvious. It's not even like a classic One Piece fake out, but you see these types of fake out deaths in shonen stories all the time, and on top of that, I don't think it would be good for Sabo's character either, because first off, vast majority of people don't think he's dead, and second of all, his character would feel kind of pointless. The only thing I will say is that it doesn't help that one of the bigger issues within One Piece is that explosions are not really treated seriously, because we've already seen people like Pell survive explosions and also a similar attack physically and narratively in Nell's El Thor. That was also completely tanked by not only Pagaya but also a bunch of other people, so the danger we feel from an explosion within One Piece is already an issue, which is why a lot of people thought Ashura Doji was still alive. But yeah, Sabo I think ultimately will be alive. As far as what really happened to him at the reverie, my best guess is after successfully rescuing Kuma, he saw that Cobra was going to meet with the Gorosei and his interest got the best of him. So he followed Cobra in there, probably learned some information about Alabasta and the world government, and he not only saw Imu but probably also them killing Cobra. In the aftermath of this though is going to be pure mayhem and chaos for the revolutionaries. They now find out there's actually a king to the world government, Sabo might be dead, some of the other rebellions might be getting squashed right away, so all of this is definitely going to be happening in the background, but for the time being it's going to be put on the back burner until we get to the final war. With that said though, let's talk about what the hell was that weapon, and to me there are a few very clear options. First off, an easy one a lot of people would jump to is ancient weapon Uranus. It fits all the descriptions. It's a devastating power that can wipe out an island, and it also came from the sky, so it's entirely possible we just saw Uranus. It also feels right that the world government has like an ancient weapon in their back pocket, but personally what I think is even more likely is the national treasure of Marijois, because this was something Doflamingo discussed back in Dressrosa, a power that can allow him to take over the world, which Imu literally has done. With this power, the world government can just completely wipe out any revolutions and rebellions and just cleanse them from history. As this power was being used as well, we kept focusing back on Imu's eyes, so it felt like it was implying that Imu was really controlling this thing. And going back to Doflamingo's conversation where he talked about pairing it with the Api Api no Mi makes it completely broken, that makes sense as well, because now with eternal life and this devastating weapon, Imu could just control the entire world however they see. So I personally think this is the most likely option, and the ancient weapons were actually created by the Great Kingdom to go against it. Another option though people have talked about is that this is straight up just Imu's powers with a devil fruit, which in a way could also connect to the national treasure of Marijois in that it is just a devil fruit. But I will say it does feel a little too OP, like a devil fruit as strong as an ancient weapon. But at the same time, I have said get ready for a massive power climb as we get into this final saga, because we are going to be encountering things like ancient weapons and doing things like destroying the Red Line and Fishman Island. So characters like Imu, Luffy, and Blackbeard are gonna need to be able to do devastating things by their powers alone. So devil fruit is definitely an option as well, but the strongest thing I believe is that this is the national treasure of Marijois. Besides that though, another question people have asked is why not use this power more? And honestly, the Gorosei already answered it. Because right before they talked about a great cleansing, they said that the world's equilibrium could not be balanced anymore. And that goes to show their real motivations. They want to keep the world in balance. They want to keep up this facade that they're not just controlling everything behind the scenes. That way they can continue to rule and take advantage of everybody and keep getting the heavenly tribute that makes them rich. And overall, I think that's the main reason why they're not just spamming this attack, but there could be a cooldown as well. Most likely they use this power at God Valley. Some people have also said why not just use this power to take out a Yonko or like Roger when he was really dangerous. But this power is really more about destruction and just erasing islands and a whole bunch of people. Because as we just saw, Sabo still probably is going to end up surviving this. Unfortunately, we're probably not going to get updates for a while, but even still, it really feels kind of surreal to be in the final saga. Because for the majority of the story, when we see something like this, we're not going to find out about it for another 10 plus years. But now that we're in the final saga, we're actually probably going to address this stuff within the next few arcs. For the time being though, we move on to the next arc, which made the end of this chapter super exciting as well. Because now we're back with the Straw Hats on their adventure. A few days have passed. They enter a new winter biome. And initially I got really hyped because I thought it might have been Elbaf, which is still possible because as we saw during the Big Mom flashback, Elbaf does have snow. But the bigger reason I thought it might have been Elbaf was because the Straw Hats saw something huge in the distance, but it turns out that was just a huge current. More importantly though, within that current, a new character appears and it is Jewelry Bonnie. And once the Straw Hats see her, it's just a classic chaotic start to a new arc. Chopper comes out to the deck and immediately gets sent. Luffy chases after him and gets sent as well. The biggest question we have to answer here though is how exactly did she get here? And this is a really tough question because initially I had some ideas, but they kind of all get debunked. My first thought is that Kuma sends her somewhere with his powers because that's the only way it really makes sense how she got here. So if that were the case, whatever island we go to next is going to be heavily related to Jewelry Bonnie, and the Straw Hats in classic fashion just coincidentally end up in the same place. At the same time, the timeline doesn't really make sense because when Kuma sends somebody, it only takes 3 days and it's been like weeks since the Reverie. Unless it was a case of her going with Kuma back to the revolutionaries and then her getting sent. Either way though, I'm sure Bonnie's gonna have an explanation that we will get in the next chapter in the next island. As far as this chapter goes though, it was an absolute banger of a chapter. This is one of those chapters, the more you read it, the more you appreciate it and the better it gets. As far as predictions go, I think the next chapter will start the next arc and we will get to the new island. I do wish we got a little more information on like Weevil and the Marines, but we could always get that later on. Obviously in this next arc, Bonnie is going to be heavily involved. We're going to get her backstory and her connection with Kuma. Back in Sabaody, Bonnie and Zoro also had a connection, so it'd be fun to see them interact. I'm sure we're going to see some shenanigans with her powers, like her turning the Straw Hats into kids, which really makes me think that in the next arc, we'll see some of the other SSG as well, and we might get some kid fights. But by the next chapter, we'll definitely be on the brand new island. And the same will be true for me as well, because I'm going to be going on vacation. I'm flying out tomorrow to Hawaii, so there's not going to be much content for the next week that I'm on vacation. I'll probably still try to get a reaction out. But guys, let me know your thoughts on the chapter. If you made it this far, you probably had a good time, so please drop a like for the YouTube algorithm. And here's another video for you to watch. Peace.